So we're not very sure about. We don't know much about you, and we started what you do in Bhutan.
This time I'm visiting friends, and I've been giving a few public talks in schools on media.
Public talks on education,
application of Buddhist principles in daily life.
We have very special interest in applying Buddhist principles to the education system.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate?
Well, I think that Buddhism is a very different kind of religion from those religions that grew up in the Middle East, particularly Islam, Christianity, Judaism, which are essentially belief systems. And in the Western world, religion is generally perceived as being a matter of beliefs or faith. And for this reason, people in the Western world tend to find Buddhism a little bit confusing. It doesn't conform to their ideas of what a religion should be. So maybe often they'll say, Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy or a way of life or something like this. So I propose the view that Buddhism is a religion, but it's a different kind of religion, and it is essentially an education system rather than a belief system. And the teachings of the Buddha are in essence the most comprehensive, most profound education system the world has ever seen. And for this reason, particularly in Buddhist countries, it makes sense to try to introduce those elements of the Buddhist education system which are generally lacking in the modern Western influenced education system. And so that the Buddhist education system can be explained in terms of four kinds of development. And that's the development of a wise relationship between the individual and the material world, and a wise relationship between the individual and the social world. And then an education of emotion, particularly developing skillful means to deal with negative emotions and to cultivate positive emotion. And lastly, the development of wisdom. So these four areas constitute the Buddhist education system, and the subjects which are taught in the conventional school systems will all fit into that. The sciences and maths and so on fit into the relationship between the human being and the material world. It also includes things like wise relationship to technology and to the environment, for instance. The wise relationship to the social world gives a particular unique Buddhist insights into cultivation of morality, and also into developing communication skills and developing social conscience and the effort to contribute to the society at large.
Definitely. I wanted to ask you a question about religion and politics. In Bhutan, our monastic community, they are not allowed to contest or vote. Do you think that is equal to keeping religion out of politics?
No, I think it's a very wise policy, and it's one that was followed by all Buddhist nations. the deviations from this really came about in those countries that were colonized, particularly in the case of Burma and Sri Lanka, in which the monastic order had always, the monks always been looked to as the leaders of the society, and so in the effort to free the country from the colonial powers, the Sangha took on a political role which it didn't relinquish after independence. But in a country like Thailand, which was never colonized, then the same principle applies of the Sangha monastic order not being involved in party politics in any way. There are some very important reasons for this. One is that if monks were to be involved in political activities, it would be a very worldly use of their time and would make them give them much less time for their particular monkish duties and responsibilities. But it would almost inevitably lead to conflict within in monastic communities, because it would be unlikely that all of the monks would have the same views and support the same parties. So it could create serious disharmony in monastic communities. And also, even if the monastic order was to be unanimous and come out in support of a particular political party, it would have long-term consequences for the stability of the monastic order. For instance, if it was to support a political party that was defeated in the polls, or it was become so identified with a particular political party, then all those people who didn't agree with that political party would at the same time feel themselves alienated from the monastic order. So the idea is, has always been that the monastic order should be providing a refuge and wise counsel to those of all political persuasions. So whether you're right-wing or left-wing, you're from this party or that party, you should ideally be able to put that all behind you the moment you go through the gates of the monastery and just become all Buddhists together. And in countries like Buddhism, and I believe in Bhutan, the monastic order has an important role to play in harmonizing the conflicting groups in society, whether it's groups in conflict through political opinion or through social status.
But in Bhutan, it's like very politically integrated kind of thing, religion, because even if you say religion is really it's about politics, and we should not be vexed. We have our candidates, and one is consulting religious. So how do you say that?
Well, it's inevitable because Buddhist identity, is so much a part of Bhutanese identity, and even if in a time of political change or a time of electioneering, people are obviously not just going to put their Buddhism to one side, and people will, I would imagine, want to go to consult religious figures that they look up to for counsel and for at least consolation or the patience to deal with the stresses and strains of electioneering. So I think that's natural and inevitable, that if someone is a Buddhist and has respect and faith in particular religious teachers, that they should wish to consult them. But what needs to be prevented is political figures manipulating their association with prestigious monks or institutions in order to create an image of themselves as being particularly spiritual or holy, or in any way cashing in on their own religious faith or commitment for some political advantage.
But what do you think? I mean, if the parties were there, they were making promises. confusing them. But in monastic community, we do that. Do you think it is right for them to say that? Do you think that would be about less about religion? If they start within their promises and manifestos, say that these are the things to do for the monastic community, although they are
I don't. No, not necessarily. I wouldn't say if, assuming that those promises are sincere and they're not just being made to kind of popularity. But the monastic body is a large body, an influential body in society, and its welfare, its well-being, its relationship to society at large. These are all issues which any government will have to deal. And so, as the government does have a certain role to play with regard to monastic affairs, then it seems that it comes within the sphere of politics in that sense. But as again, it should be restricted to that sphere over which the government of the day would have a legitimate responsibility and need. Again, and it's the role, of course, it's the role of the press to make sure that politicians are not manipulating very potent symbols and things that religious institutions in order to gain some kind of personal advantage.
I don't have much questions. Another one is what do you think is the role of religious politics? What's the role of religion play?
Well, because I can only speak from my background in Thailand, and it's there are similarities and probably differences here, and I'm not sufficiently familiar here. But I would say that the idea is that monks or religious figures should clarify general Buddhist principles which are come into question or as a matter of dispute, and to be, for instance, emphasizing the importance of tolerance and mutual respect, and that a democratic system is one in which we believe that many heads are better than one, and that we get together and we talk and we discuss and we disagree, and we work out compromises together for the welfare of the whole country, and that inevitably there will be emotions aroused, and that as Buddhists we need to be maintaining that sense of mindfulness and awareness and tolerance and giving people the benefit of the doubt, and not assuming that because we believe we're right, they must be wrong, that we're honest, therefore they're dishonest, we're not corrupt, therefore they're corrupt, and to prevent this polarization of attitudes within society, because that's very dangerous. And this is definitely the role of the monk to point out the danger of these kinds of negative mental attitudes. Monks should be giving advice on how to deal with anger and resentment, and how to deal with differences of opinion without them becoming conflicts and without leading to violence and to ill consequences for the country. So, I think that we, Buddhist monks, Buddhist leaders, Buddhist nuns, should be examples of calm and tolerance and compassion, and reminding everybody that the things that unite us far, far exceed the things that divide us, and that we should not forget that we're, in the end of the day, we're all Bhutanese, we all want the best for our country, although we may have different ideas about what that best might be and what the path towards it might be. But be willing to listen. Don't just listen to the people that have the same opinions as you do, but with an open mind listen to people that have very different ideas, and learn to weigh them up with a sense of justice and tolerance and fairness. So I think that monks stand back in order to give the big picture, and it's not because democratic processes necessarily short term, like 4 years, 5 years, or something like this, and tends to get bogged down in particular issues and people and personalities. Whereas the religious organization should be giving the big picture, the 100 years or the 500 years picture rather than the 5-year picture.
This is the last question, and it's not really about religion and politics, but it's about the health of monks. Recently, there was a story, and then we found that our monks were not very healthy, and there were also cases of sodomy in the monastic community. Just thinking you could comment on that, do you think?
Yes, it's the cases of serious breaches of discipline, sexual misconduct, that these will always be occurring in monastic institutions, celibate institutions. The difficulty is always to know just to what extent this is going on. And cases of sodomy or so on, they're so outrageous and scandalous, and they sell newspapers and people like to read about them. But it's also very difficult to know whether this is something that's going on in a widespread, or it's just an isolated case, and that's something that I certainly have no data. But because anything to do with monks, it brings up a lot of emotion, and so people tend to jump to conclusions that everything's going to the dogs. But the case, I often say to people in Thailand, because in Thailand the tabloids, they like monk scandal stories, they sell them very well. It's good business for media. But I say if you take a figure, say 300,000 monastics in Thailand, and let's say 99% of them were completely pure and good monks, and I'm sure it doesn't reach anywhere near like that, but let's say 99% for the sake of argument, and you had 1% who were immoral and bad monks, that would give you 3,000. And so if you were trying to you wanted a scandal on your front page of your newspaper every day, you could, and people who read it would quite naturally assume that the monastic order was in a terrible state, when in fact you're publicizing the misdemeanors of 1% of the population. So whether or not that's an analogy for Bhutan or not, I don't know. But I think that there does need to be a great deal of care taken, not to censor stories about misbehavior by monks, because that's not good for the monastic order either. But at the same time, taken out of context, these things are so shocking, and people remember them, and it can bring the monastic order into disrepute in a way which may not be fair to it. The other one's about monks being in bad health. Yeah, this again. I mean, I feel in my own teaching and administration in Thailand, I've run a big monastery, and I make it very clear to monks they have a responsibility to keep in good health, because in Thailand we're mendicant monks. We're entirely dependent on generosity of lay supporters. If we get ill, then it's a burden on our lay supporters, and it's an expense for them to provide medical care. So apart from just being common sense to take care of your physical health, then it's also a responsibility to those who support you. I think that this is one of the areas of monastic life which an overly conservative view is not the best one. I think in many monastic communities there is there's a kind of a prejudice that taking exercise is a kind of a very worldly activity that people do out of sense of vanity because they want to look good, and that monks should be involved and interested in being big and healthy and handsome or beautiful, but it goes too far the other way, and then they neglect their health. And also, I'm not sure about the nutrition and what foods they're eating, what salt is given to that. But usually these are the cases of poor nutrition and lack of exercise, and I can't see anything myself in conflict with monastic principles against some reasonable amount of exercise and good nutrition.
Good nutrition including meat, is that?
Not necessarily. I mean, just not eating junk foods. Now these days, more of these around. Just taking an interest in what foods are good for your body and what foods are not, and to the extent that it's possible, trying to eat those foods which agree with the needs of your physical body rather than ones that taste good.
You must have visited for temples in Thailand now. You must have noticed that most of the offerings made to the temples are junk.
Yeah. Well, it's probably, I mean, I understand because we have the same problem in Thailand, and it's because it's convenient. And if somebody is working 6 days a week, and they have very limited time to go to the temple, and they don't have much money, and they can just pop into a shop and just buy a packet of this and a packet of that, it's quite understandable. But so I think it's quite good to publicize if monks now are finding that their diet is becoming more and more composed of this kind of food, and to try to encourage lay people to take that into account, and understanding that it may not always be possible, but that when there is a choice, the healthy foods for the monks is better, because the monks, certainly the monks in the temples up in the mountains, they're not being able to buy their own food and to make up for any deficiencies in their diet by themselves. So it's something that the lay supporters need to bear in mind.
So the monks cannot say other monastic community, but the other community that they give efficient that offer such offerings. Do you think that that's not going to happen?
No, I don't think so, because as monks we don't feel we have a right to tell people what you should give. But I think that it's quite appropriate to remind people that, particularly if there are statistics now that monks' health is not good, and I would assume in terms of exercise, just in Bhutan, you're walking around, it's a very healthy country, so I would think that the problem would be nutrition rather than exercise. And just trying to come up with a way of dealing with that, and this may lead to some discussion with the monastic body and for how they see the problem. So, but I mean, also the young monks. I mean, these junk foods. If you're young, they're addictive as well. And I'm sure the young monks and novices, they like them. And that's
Thank you so much.